Webcam only,
Okay.
and we're live, but
Yeah.
probably nobody's watching. And then TV with webcam will, when you're doing your PowerPoint.
Where can I get the presenter view with my notes?
Okay, I wasn't sure if you had notes, so let's work on that.
If you guys want to set those tables up in some...
So webcam only. When you're ready to start having your presentation, just click TV with webcam overlay.
So like right now, I'm ready to start, so we'll do that, right?
Yep. And then you show up in the bottom corner, and people can see you on the PowerPoint.
And I move on from this.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. All right, I think we got it figured out. Thanks for joining me this morning. One of the jobs, I guess, of a rector is to look at things that seem to be ailing your parish and address those things in ways that make sense and ways that allow God to speak into that situation. And one of the things that I see that over the last year has become much more exacerbated is the way we take in information and the way that we process information, the way we decide what we will believe, what we will think, what we will toss out, where we find our words of authority in our life. And I find that to be a great hodgepodge of sources. And certainly technology has made that even worse. And so over these next weeks, I want to focus in on that topic about how we think in a much more intentional way about the information that we take in and how we choose what we're not going to take in and how we balance out the information that we bring in. And so that's kind of where I want to go today. So I'm addressing specifically something that I see as a problem, not just in our church, but throughout our world, certainly our community, our country, but it's also here. And so that first slide kind of tells you the source of the problem. What if we had been spending our time over the last several years just eating essentially junk food? Where would we be at this point? And so the basic concept here is that as food is to the body, information is to our minds. In other words, it's what we take in. It's what allows us to make good, healthy decisions for our life and to live well. And if that's the case, then using this parallel between what we take in terms of food and what we take in terms of information is the model that we're going to explore. But here's the problem. We get too much information. We can't process all the information that bombards us today. If we open ourselves up to hearing it from all the sources that have found their way into our lives, here's the man right here. Thank you, Lee.
I should have taken orders.
Yeah, or maybe we need to do something called coffee hour again, huh? So the challenge is, what do we do with all the information that we get? Well, wisdom is what we use to eat right. Right? We don't eat just chips and Oreos. We use wisdom to make choices. At least that's the idea, that we would use wise choices. And we can do the same thing in regards to the information that we take in. The point is, we need a balanced diet of foods. We also need a balanced diet of information, and that's where the wisdom comes in. And it's wisdom that comes with, as Paul puts it, with discernment. It's the ability to judge well what it is we're absorbing. Perception with a view to obtaining God's guidance and God's understanding, and for us to understand Him more. The ability to judge well. Paul talks about wisdom and discernment. To be able to make good decisions. To be able to think through information, options, and to make decisions that are for our good and the good of those around us. And also looking for how to obtain God's guidance. How does He guide us? How do we find out how He would want us to understand a particular situation or a decision that we're trying to make? What considerations should we take into account to judge well and seek His guidance? For example, I have, let's look at this. I've got a 14-year-old car. I can trade it in, or I can get it repaired for $2,000. And so that's the conundrum that I'm in. Do I fix this car? So how do we use information? How do we judge well? How do we make a good decision for that particular question? What would be some answers? What would be some things that would make this an intelligent decision?
I don't have enough money to buy a new car.
Do I have enough money? Right?
Yes.
Can I afford to buy a new car? Or, do I have to fix it right now because I don't have the money? Okay, that's a question. That's a good one. What else would make...
If I put the $2,000 into the repair, how long will everything else last? How soon will I have to put in another $2,000?
How much life does this car still have in it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How do you bring God's perspective into that question?
Well, pretty much a steward of everything that you see.
Mm-hmm.
So is that being, the wisest, or at least trying to make the wisest decision?
What about
Yeah.
something like, am I considering the new car for image's sake rather than practicality's sake?
Right. So what am I actually looking to accomplish by this move, right? Am I trying to solve my transportation issue and give myself some security with a car that works, or do I just really want a new car? Yeah, okay, that's a good one.
Because a new car will make me happy.
Mm-hmm. For a while.
Uh-huh.
About 5 minutes, yeah.
Until you get the first bill.
What is it the Amish say? The Quakers? The day you buy the car, you own it. Every day after that, it owns you. That's what they say. That money that you're going to spend on that new car, what will you not be able to do now that you spent it on that? What other good things that you might do with that money will not be able to happen because you spent it on the car? That would be like tithing, like helping somebody that you know is in need. How will it inhibit your carrying through your Christian duties and responsibilities? So that's an example, right, of thinking through something and using information in order to help us judge well and get the perception of God's guidance. But in an age that is filled with distractions, right, from every direction, short news clips, we lose our appetite for wisdom. We don't want to take the time. Nobody has the time to think through these kinds of things. But this is the way we're made to be able to sort through things like that in a careful way. But when we are bombarded with information, sometimes our tendency is to simply turn from it and just make a decision because the bombardment is too uncomfortable. I don't know what to do with all that. My uncle said this, my mother says that, my kids are telling me I ought to do this, and the neighbor down the street said that, and I don't know what to do. So I just know I want a new car. So the digital revolution has certainly made this a lot more challenging, doesn't it? It hasn't just tweaked our daily life. I mean, it has transformed our daily life in a massive way. We're now aware of everything. We're aware of everything, and that means we're really wise about nothing. See, the awareness overwhelms us, and the wisdom, the ability to sort through all of that to the nuggets of information that are useful and helpful and to help me understand God's will and purpose. It's very hard to do that, and technology has made it worse. It sounds like the more information we get should be good, right? But when it's overwhelming, it's not necessarily a helpful thing. So, here's a passage from Proverbs about wisdom. Wisdom cries aloud in the street, and in the markets she raises her voice. In Scripture, wisdom is always feminine. It's always she. She raises her voice. At the head of the noisy streets, she cries out. At the entrance of the city gates, she speaks. And what does wisdom say? How long, O simple ones, will you love being simple? How long will scoffers delight in their scoffing, and fools hate knowledge? Nothing changes. How long will scoffers delight in their scoffing? How long will we hate knowledge? And how long will we love being simple? If we're wise about nothing, that means we can fall for anything. Anyone who wants our attention can get it. If they want to sell us something, they can probably sell us that. And I don't just mean things. I mean ideas. I mean perceptions of certain things. We're very gullible and manipulatable because we're not wise. And so we can fall for lots of different things that come our way. So let's just look at some of the things. We have more and more information, but we have less and less wisdom. In other words, the ability to process that information to make good decisions. That ability has not grown in parallel relative to the amount of information we have. We have lots more data, but we lack clarity. More distractions, much less stillness. We were talking one day, Sue and I, about what did people do in the evening before radio? Before, everybody sat in the living room around the radio, and like we do now around our screens and our TVs and all those good things. What did they do before that? And there was just a lot of stillness. If you talk to people who were older and didn't always have the technology in their homes, there was stillness. People did their own things. There was quiet. There was a time, and people went to bed early, and they got up early. So, you didn't sit up until 11 o'clock, but there was more stillness in life. And we've lost stillness, and stillness is something the body needs. But sometimes we need to be able to turn off that incredible flow of information that never seems to end. We've got lots and lots of opinions, right? Lots of opinions. We know what everybody thinks about everything all the time. I mean, that's what social media has done. We know everything anybody's thinking and what their opinion is. But what we really lack is good, solid research. And if it's not there, if it is there, we don't know which it is. We don't know which is the good, solid information that's useful to help me in my life and which is just other people's opinions. Unless we dig hard, we can't tell. We just hear lots of stuff. A lot of pontificating goes on, right? Less pondering, less, thoughtfulness, less thoughtful discussion. More about me expounding what I think about whatever it is.
you know, to add to that.
Yeah.
That really just adds to all that you're saying here is, not only are we seeing more of the distraction, the opinions, but I'm feeling the opinions, and not that it's okay that I have a different opinion. It's like I'm feeling such polarizing opinions, and it's either this way or you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of adds to this to me too.
No question. And we're going to get into some of that. Yep. A lot of talk, far less listening to what other people think, other people's views, especially if they're not like mine. I have a hard time hearing those. Unfriend, unlike, just, turn that off. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear what people that think like me. Listening. A lot to look at, less to see. I thought that was interesting. How many things do you look at on a given day on your computer, on your phone, whatever, your tablet? Think of all the stuff you look at. And what are you actually taking in and spending the time to really see and understand? It just goes flying by. It's about amusement, and it doesn't really give us a lot of joy, does it? It's harsh. The internet world is harsh. The world is harsh. Technology has just made that harshness even more vivid and in my face. And a lot less love shown. You see love when you see people together. You see neighbors that help neighbors. You see love in your community. Boy, you don't see a lot of it in the technology world, though, do you? You do see some. So where do you see evidence of these things as you look around your life, and you look around the community and your family? Where do you see evidence of those things?
Can I add one?
Please.
You see more negative validation. As in, if you think a thing, you can always find somebody to support it, whether or not it's right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And you see less people giving constructive criticism.
Yeah. So it's more, but a lot of the more is negative more. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Where else do you see these things? Yeah, how you see it playing out. Trying to get my camera straight here. Yeah, say what you're thinking.
Yeah, no, that not only are we affected in this way, but even like the leaders of our country.
Oh, sure.
Are affected. The leaders of our churches and congregations in the country.
Yep. That's right. That's right.
It's not just a personal thing.
No, that's right.
Everything's polarized.
Very polarized.
Yeah, you
Very polarized.
have different
Yeah.
ideas and people flock to different, and there's no give and take. There's no sit down and reason things out together.
Mm-hmm. That's where listen and talk are balanced, right? When all I want to do is talk, it doesn't help us resolve things. What it does is it breaks relationships, doesn't it? I don't want to be with somebody who just talks constantly and never listens to me, and they don't want to be near me if I'm like that.
Well, that's part of what social media is it's a way for people to be seen, because there's technology is at the same time giving us more connected but less connected. So by acting out or speaking out or voicing your opinions, you're looking for people who to see you and hear you.
Mm.
And that's a whole problem in and of itself.
It is about me, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So St. Paul wrote this in his letter to the Philippians when he was writing to them from prison. It's my prayer that your love may abound more and more, with knowledge and all discernment, that you may approve what is excellent. Make good decisions. Knowledge and discernment. You take in information, you learn it, and then you use it wisely, right? That's discernment, right? Taking what we know and using it in the proper manner, in a way that lifts up, builds up, It doesn't tear down. Approve what is excellent, what is good. Be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruits of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ to the glory and praise of God. Knowledge and discernment. He prayed for that. Why did he pray for that in particular for those people? The church in Philippi was located at a great crossroads on a major trade route to the east. Came across, went in through northern Italy and came into Rome. Or you could, cross the sea into Rome, into Italy. In that city were Romans, many retired Roman military would retire there because there wasn't enough food and water back in Rome, so they set up outside camps, and this was one of them. There were non-Romans there. There were foreigners there who had come and settled there, who had been on that trade route. There were Jews. There were Gentiles. Now there were rich. There were some wealthy people. There were people who had lived there all their lives for generations. And then there were all these newcomers, and there were plenty of poor. And there were some of all of those in this church of Philippi. And so he's calling this highly diverse church to unity. And he's saying, if you're going to be united as God's people, with all your differences, you're going to need knowledge and discernment in order to do that. You're going to need to make decisions wisely. And so that's where he was coming from. And so we're actually called to be a storehouse of wisdom. God's people are to be the storehouse of what is wise. You want to know how to do something wisely. For many years you talked to the church. The church knew how to do things in a wise manner. The church knew how to do a lot of things wrong too. Let's not forget that. But wisdom, there was an interest in understanding wisdom by understanding God's ways. And that's what the church was about, right? We tried to understand God's ways, and that allows us to be wise. And so this idea of the pyramid, there's a food pyramid. And you see how that's laid out. It's laid out so that the things at the bottom is what you want the most of, and less as you go up, and you see what those foods are. And yet those things at the top, fats, oil, salt, sweets, eat less of those, right? Less and less as you go up. And that's been around since I think the 1950s they started with that. And so the idea here, and this is an idea that was put forward by a guy named Brett McCracken, and he's a Christian author, and kind of built this parallel to the food pyramid with wisdom. And we're going to go through, over the next 7 weeks, we're going to go through each one of those layers and talk about how those things feed into helping us become more wise, and how each one of them is a way of seeing and understanding our Lord in a deeper and more intimate way. And so we'll work ourselves from the bottom. But you see how that's laid out, right? The Bible should be a primary source of wisdom. I mean, we need to spend time in Scripture, because Scripture is the way we come to understand the revelation of God in His Son Jesus, and in His revelation before the time of Jesus. And then there's the church, 2,000 years of history built up. There's got to be some wisdom. There has got to be some nuggets of wisdom in the church after 2,000 years. Plenty of things that aren't wise, and we try to push those aside, but there's got to be some wisdom here. Nature and beauty. The other way that we know and understand God. They call that general revelation. The revelation that God makes to us via His creation. Other books that have timeless wisdom, or that help us to see things from different lights. Finally, the internet, and then at the very top, social media. So we'll talk about those and why that particular order starts to make sense if our goal is really to be wise. But I want to take some time and talk about how we got to this point. How did we get here in taking in so much bad or useless information? So I want to sort of help us to come to a deep understanding of the problem. What is the problem? And then how does this suggest a way that we might address it as Christians? So the effect that the information revolution has had on us. Here's one. Opinion is unidentifiable from fact. It's hard to know the difference. This goes way back. I can remember a survey done this is probably the early 90s, 91 or 92. And it was a survey to find out how much credibility did people give to talk show hosts. And talk shows were big stuff on radio in those days. And it turned out that like 70% of the people thought what they were hearing was factual information, because I'm hearing it on the radio where I've always turned it on for my news every day. And now I'm hearing, this man or woman who's on in the evening from 7 to 8 and is saying all this. And I just put that all in the same pot. And I'm assuming this is news. When in fact, if pushed against the wall, they would tell you this isn't news. This is a different kind of program. This is a program about sharing opinions. But people believed whatever it was they heard. And they didn't understand, and we began to get this gap between what's somebody's opinion and what's a fact. Social media lets us all be experts, right? Everybody's an expert now. Everybody's an expert, right? You have, I don't know, you hurt your shoulder. First thing you do is you get online and you see, what did somebody else do who had a shoulder like that, and how did they resolve it? And that might be helpful, or it may not be helpful at all. Is that the best place to go? Because everybody on there sets themselves up as an expert. And so we're left with a question of, who do we trust? Who do I trust if I really want good information? Where do I go for that? And there's support on there, your point, Christy, for every idea. It doesn't matter how ridiculous it is. The earth is flat. There's a whole crowd of people on there who will absolutely stand behind that. So it doesn't matter how crazy the idea may be. There's somebody on there, and there's probably more than one, and there's a group that will validate that thinking and will give you a place to think, see, I'm not so crazy that I think the earth is flat. There's a whole lot of people that do. And you know what? Maybe we're right. So as a result, no one can understand anything. We're just, it's confusing, isn't it? I mean, you hear that word a lot today. It's just confusing. It's hard to know. And that brings me to the great Ford Chevy debate. So what do we do in light of all that we just said? This is kind of a personal story. This is my brother-in-law. His name is Frank, and my son-in-law, his name is Bob. And Frank is Mr. Ford. He loves Fords. Loves Fords. The best cars ever, best trucks ever. You got to get a Ford. Stu and I were looking to get a truck to pull our campers. You got to get a Ford. You got to get a Ford, Frank. Bob is Mr. Chevy. No, Chevys. Chevy trucks are the best. No question. It has to be a diesel. We didn't get a diesel. Yeah, diesel. So, they both, and this wasn't, to them, this was not opinion. To them, this is the fact of life. Fords are the best. No, Chevys are the best. And so everybody guided us to help us make that decision for ourselves. Now, both of them have trucks, and they know, but they're coming from two different places. They have completely different decisions that they've made and opinions. So what are we to do in that situation? Buy the Toyota, right? I like that.
We can tick off everybody.
Yeah, right. Yeah, tick them all off. So, first of all, I can do my own homework, can't I? I can go and I can try to dig into the information myself, see some, unbiased review organizations, consumer reports, whatever it may be. I can do my own homework. Or we can make what's called a social decision. Who of those two do I want to be on good terms with most? Who do I not want to offend by not taking their advice? Who will be less ruffled, angry even, by our decision? And this is something that we hear about now in social media, right? This idea of virtue signaling. Do you know that term? Virtue signaling? Virtue signaling is when you're on there and you're hearing people and you want them to think that you're like them, and you hit a like. And you don't do anything, you're not doing anything. So somebody puts something on there and it's in support of more support for our military veterans, and you want to be looked at as somebody who wants to support our military veterans, and so you hit like. You're not actually doing anything to help our military veterans, but you hit like so that the people on there would say, oh, see, he's like me, she's like me. You're signaling the virtue that you want other people to attach to you without actually having to do anything. So that's kind of what this is. Do I do this in order to signal that I don't want you to be mad, Frank and Bob? So what do we do? Well, first of all, rage competes with reality to get attention. Rage always gets the attention, doesn't it? So you turn on the TV or the radio. It's the rage that makes you listen, right? It's the rage. Think of it in the news. It's the things where somebody is just absolutely furious. Think about it on the road as you're driving, right? If you want attention, you don't just kind of shake your head quietly when somebody pulls out in front of you. No, you pull up beside them, you put the window down, you shout at them, you do a number of hand gestures, you speed up behind them and get within an inch of their bumper and almost push them off the road. That's how you get attention. Rage. We have a nice, quiet, peaceful protest in Washington, D.C., and we hear speakers and we all applaud and we go home, or we attack the Capitol. Rage gets the attention, a lot more attention than if the protest had just been ended and everybody went on their way. It would have made a news clip on the second page, and that would have been it. There was a protest. But now, rage gets the attention. Where else do you see this in our world? Where do you see rage getting the attention versus whatever the reality may be? Think about it.
Like the prices at the grocery store? I mean, is that what you're looking for?
I don't know. How do you mean that?
I get angry because every week I go, they're up another $1 or something.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes me
Do
really
you yell and flip out?
to Jay.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
I'd like to take
Yeah.
And Lee controls those prices. So
Well, like I'll come over and say, well, look at these 2 days groceries, that's how much they were. And then,
I think it's where we see people using anger and rage to draw attention to what it is they want us to see, to get attention.
yeah.
You know what, Ron, I'd say, and this is just, we live in an HOA.
Yeah.
And we're having problems with the grass, okay? Especially last year, it burned it all out. So they came through and they did the fertilizing this year, slid it, fertilized it, and then they asked the people to water it, because there's not a watering system. And there's been so many diverse reactions to that would go from, yeah, okay, that sounds reasonable, to there's no way I want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like right on the edge of rage.
Yeah.
Because they have to water the
Right.
grass.
Right.
So, and I think that's part of this, because you see it
Mm-hmm.
like, you're always looking at TV, and you're always seeing a protest, and it's never more, it's not like you used to see the protests walked around with the sign,
Yeah.
but now the protest is there's a fireball going, there's someone being beat up, there's someone being killed,
Mm-hmm.
and it's more rage, and you see that, and
It works, doesn't it?
yeah.
Rage works.
Yeah.
It does get our attention.
I feel like it's the reason for that is because we've become so desensitized to more peaceful ways of things that you need an extreme in order to get a reaction.
To be heard.
Because
Yeah.
I mean, people
Yeah.
just don't care anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They're like,
Mhm.
oh, in one ear, out the other.
And
Oh,
it,
there's another school shooting. Oh wow. Oh, I guess like now the next guy says, oh well, I guess I need to bomb the whole school rather than just.
Right.
like,
Right.
It just keeps escalating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's not like you're listening to the other person. I mean, for the simple thing like that watering, if you want to water and you say, oh, it's okay, you know, well, you're really stupid if you're doing that. You know, just like these reactions to something that really is pretty meaningless when you think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Little kids do it all the time.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes,
I want this, and they're raging.
yes.
Yeah.
You're right, Sue.
Yeah. A
Lot of
tantrum, right?
attention for it.
Uh-huh.
Gets a lot more attention. Yeah. So the results of all that is to each his own. We all do our own thing. And we don't know really any other way to approach it. And so by 2016, this became the word of the year. Post-truth. That we are now in a post-truth age. In other words, we can't really determine truth anymore. We can't agree on what truth is anymore. And so we're past that. So now we're looking at a life where truth isn't really a functional term. Some of you might remember this. I do. 1967, I was in high school. Time magazine, I remember the cover article, Is God Dead? And it was predicting the death of God over the next years. The notion of God would completely evaporate in American society. And 3 years ago, they did the same, but this time they said, is truth dead? Are we at a point in life where truth no longer has meaning? And yet, without God as a standard for truth, all we really have is mine and yours. And of course, that's a term we hear all the time now, right? My truth, your truth, which are mostly just opinions. Okay, for me to tell you, that why you should buy a Chevy or why you should buy a Ford, it's my opinion. I might call it my truth, but it's not really a truth. It's really my opinion. So we're living in a culture where that notion of truth has a very different meaning. Gene Twenge, wonderful book. If that's not the longest title of a book I've ever seen, try to beat that. iGen, that's the group of people born between 95 and 2012. And the title is iGen, Why Today's Super-Connected Kids Are Growing Up Less Rebellious and More Tolerant, Less Happy, and Completely Unprepared for Adulthood, and What That Means to the Rest of Us. She's an American psychologist, researches primarily generational differences, professor of psych at San Diego State University. And she's done a compilation of a massive research on the topic. And her point is saying what we have is it's a disease that we're struggling with negative consequences, and nearly everybody is infected. And it's this notion of overwhelming information, amounts of information, and an inability to determine what is true out of all that. So some of the questions she explored. Has your cell phone made you a happier person? 40 call.
I don't have one. Yeah.
You're the happiest one here. Of 40 college students, only 3 said yes. Now you would think college students would definitely think, yeah, but even they see it. today's college students, highest levels of depression, loneliness, anxiety, sleeplessness, suicidal thoughts of any generation in the past 50 years. Other comments as she summarized some of the research. It's pretty small. When I open my Twitter account and see the vile name calling, ranting, and virtue signaling, I start to feel sick to my stomach. But I keep reading it. When I'm searching through all my links and apps, checking to see who said what, looking at scores, reading news, I can feel removed from my body. Even when I'm doing something important, I keep checking my phone. How do I stop? I find myself doing 2, 3, or 4 things simultaneously. I'm writing a paper, but I keep stopping to check email, see a Facebook post has surfaced. Oh, did I get a message from a friend? It's making me crazy. And they're liking this to a slot machine addict. That we've become conditioned to putting more coins in the machine, and things happen, and lights blink, and new sites show up. Information comes. Psychologists tell us when we get a dose of that feel-good chemical dopamine in our brains, when we get that feeling in our brains, then we're hooked in that the constant changing, new ads, new outrageous things that keep coming across our technology, it's giving us that little boost of dopamine each time, and it's the kind of thing that actually moves people toward addictions, because I want that again, and I want it again, and I want it again.
You mentioned earlier about the day I buy the car, I own it.
Yeah.
The day after, it owns me.
Yeah.
The cell phone, the day I buy it, I own it, and the day after that, it tells me what to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
There you have it. We've allowed technology to control us, and we need to control the technology and ourselves. All right, we'll do just a little bit more, and then we'll get ready for next time. I want to look at what Scripture has to say toward some of these things. And in this case, it's about self-control, because in a way, technology, like anything else, right, has its positives and it has its negatives, and it's all based on how we use it, right? And that speaks to our ability to control ourselves. A man without self-control is like the city broken into and left without walls. That's one to ponder. St. Paul writes, "No temptation has overtaken you that's not common to man. God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond your ability, but with the temptation, he will provide the way of escape that you might be able to endure it."
Trick is to find a way to escape.
Yeah. Well,
Then to take it.
well, for some reason, this is...
For a lot of people, their cell phone or computer is their escape.
Is there what?
Yes.
Their escape, yeah,
Yes.
from something else, right?
Right.
With the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, against such things there is no law. For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. And finally, Peter, make every effort to supplement your faith with virtue. Follow this line of thinking, virtue, and virtue with knowledge, and knowledge with self-control, and self-control with steadfastness, and steadfastness with godliness, and godliness with brotherly affection, and brotherly affection with love. And if you look at each of those, he moves from actions, body, to mind, thinking. That each moves, the body moves us to think in a particular way, actions cause us to think a way, that causes us to act differently, that causes us to think differently, and it moves us along this continuum that finally takes us to love. It's really interesting. So, a couple questions in the few moments that we have left. Where do you see any of these things in your own life or the lives of those around you? What strikes you as right when you hear this? Go ahead, Don.
this kind of goes back to what I said before, but few of us realize how little of what we know we learned ourselves. We rely on other people for almost everything we know. I mean, the earth is round. How many of us have been around the world?
Right.
Very few.
Right.
So everything, almost everything we know, somebody told us.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to pick who you're listening to, who you're paying attention to, and so I think that's the real takeaway from this.
Agree.
Used to be we get information from libraries,
Yes.
and every library has a librarian that makes sure that what comes in meets his or her standards. And nowadays, and for a long, I mean, I spent lots of time in libraries, and I'd find little things slipped in the book, you know. Oh, this isn't true, you know, look at this instead. And the job of the librarian is to keep that stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're looking at various sources, we have to think the internet is like a library with no librarian. Everybody can throw it in and it looks as good as the other stuff.
Boy, that's a great picture. Yeah.
Yeah, but today we have fact checkers, so don't forget that. I mean, I've never seen so many fact checkers during
Who checks the fact checker?
yeah.
See, it was the thing. We trusted the librarian, right?
Right.
We put that trust in that person. Were they perfect? Probably not, but it was a whole lot better than nobody at all.
I grew up thinking that Bill Burns, when he recorded the noon news with my mom and dad.
And then watch Walter Cronkite in the evening. You were all set.
But I remember the day I found out that Bill Burns wasn't that it wasn't all truth. It was like the day I found out there wasn't Santa. You know, it was like, I just thought that was it. That was the truth that I could, when Dad would sit down and watch that, and we'd watch it together, that was truth. And this just seems like a perfect time to talk about this together here, and I'm glad you're offering it, because it's like everywhere. It's too much.
The example of what the media does. Just yesterday, we went to the clubhouse for dinner. The waitress said she canceled her vaccine appointment because it was Johnson & Johnson, and she heard that it was only 70% effective. But I said, okay, but that's what the media tells you, but if you look into it deeper, it's 70% effective, but it's 100% effective keeping you from getting hospitalized from the disease. It's 100% effective keeping you from dying from it. You know, and so it's actually more effective than a flu vaccine. But the media is not telling you all that.
Well, we're going to kind of get into some of that about what's the media's role? What are they trying to do? And it's probably not to make sure you get the best information possible. There's probably a lot of other things that guide why they do what they do. All right, I think we'll stop there. So that last set of scripture passages is the hope for us. So I don't want to end feeling like this gets hopeless, but we are trying to define and get a sense of the problem, and I want us all to see it. But I also want you to see that there's hope here, and what we're going to be moving toward over these weeks is solutions, a way to live a better, healthier, more balanced life, and ultimately a more godly life. All right, thanks, folks.
And wait now,
Wait.
let's vote. What do you think we bought? A Chevy? Chevy.
You got the diesel.
No, we didn't get the diesel, but we did get the Chevy.
Oh, okay.
Well, everybody knows you have to buy a Ford.
No,
we bought a Chevy.
we see the son-in-law a lot more than the brother-in-law, so we just, yeah. We made the social decision. Thank you, folks.
Thanks, Ron.
Yep.
We bought a Honda, but it depends on what we wanted.
This is just like perfect. I'm so glad you do. Well, I don't think you're curious. Because I think it doesn't